Hi, everybody. Welcome. This is Linda Joy. We're here for our virtual book club, and I'm so happy to be with our guest today, Sarah Birnbach. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you, Linda Joy. It's great to be here.
I know it is great to have you. We were just chatting just before the camera started about having met, I guess, what, 2/3 of the way of your process of writing this book, but you're going to tell us more about that.
Right.
But a little bit like a reunion. We used to meet on the phone and stuff, and here we are Zooming, which is fabulous. So let me introduce Sarah a little bit more. She began her career as a nonfiction writer in 2016 after successful careers as a human resource management consultant and a family therapist in a juvenile court. Oh, I know what that's like. Okay. As a sought-after speaker at conferences, she delivered more than 500 presentations and workshops, and she dedicates herself to enabling people to become their best selves, all of which is a great description of you. And so, Sarah, here we are together talking about your brand new, it came out, what, a few days ago? When did it come out?
Yeah. On the 27th of September, last week. It's really new.
How you doing with this?
Great. I had some early readers who posted some really wonderful reviews, and people like Linda, who's on this call, who's responded to me with some positive feedback. So far it's looking good.
That's good. Well, fabulous. Congratulations. And so what we want to talk about today is your journey. And there's several journeys involved in getting here after your book is out. And it's the writing journey and it's the publishing journey. And so I know people here would really love to hear about all of that. So I mean, why don't we start with why you wanted to write this story, this book? Let's start with that, okay?
I had a number of reasons. First, writing it was therapeutic for me. But why I wanted to publish it was, first of all, to teach people of all faiths about Jewish mourning rituals, but also to let people know that when you know someone who's grieving, mourning, that it doesn't end just because somebody goes back to work. Or because they look good on a particular day doesn't mean they're back to normal. And I wanted people to understand the importance of a community to helping people heal. And whether that's within Jewish rituals or other faith rituals, I thought it was important for people to understand that when we're mourning and grieving, we need people around us. The other reason that I published it is because my 12-month journey, I couldn't have done it without tremendous determination. And I wanted readers, people, especially people who read memoir, to see that if we set our mind to something and we're really determined to achieve it, we can do it.
Well, so give people the context of what you're talking about. Of course, your book title is Daughter's Kaddish, My Year of Grief, Devotion, and Healing. So that's that 12-month journey you were referring to. And everything you just said is so universally important, you know, and what we want to do with our memoirs a lot of the time is to offer some new learning, some new insight to readers, not just about our story, but the universality and the messages that we have to deliver. So congratulations on that. I'm sure your book does that. And I remember experiencing some of that when I was working with you and learning about your story. So first start with, what is your book about? And what is the arc of your book, so people can have some context if they haven't read it yet, which some people probably haven't had a chance to do.
In the Jewish faith, and my father was a more traditional Jew, he believed that his soul would go to paradise if and when his son recited the mourner's Kaddish prayer for 11 months, twice a day, every day, in the presence of a quorum that we call a minyan. but my father had no sons.
Mm.
So he had asked me to hire a man to undertake this ritual for him. And I decided that the voice of a stranger would not be nearly as powerful to God as my voice. And so I first had to convince my father. And then I undertook to recite this prayer in synagogue every morning and every evening for 11 months. And
Wow.
because my job required a lot of travel, I was in places all over the country. And my story is about places where I was accepted and embraced for my prayer practice and places where I wasn't because of my gender.
Right. Yeah, that's big, isn't it? Right there. Very, very powerful stuff. Oh
Yeah.
my goodness, and how people, I mean, every religion has these range of strictures and strictness and whatever ways of also dealing with exceptional situations, whatever they might be. But so I think there's a universality in that as well. But this was your particular experience, and the sort of the whole thing about. So tell us a little bit about. Now I know that you intervened with your dad around that request. So can you tell us a little bit about that very personal? You wanted to do this, and you spoke to him about it.
I likened my father to Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof, a very traditional man with these 3 feminist daughters. I don't know if I ever really convinced my father, but I did want his blessing. And in a few months before he died, he gave me his blessing. He told me, you don't need it, but if you feel like you need it, you have it. And I don't know why I felt like I needed it. I was a grown adult.
Oh, well, parents, it's very complicated for us with parents.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then of course, your book is very much about family dynamics.
Oh, yes.
Now you and I are both family therapists. So, hey, we have some training, but on the other hand, that may or may not be helpful in certain situations. Talk a little bit about, though, I mean, I just did a talk for another course that Brooke and I are giving about family fallout. So it's kind of at the front of my mind right now about what you needed to deal with in not only, I don't remember, tell me, praying, saying the Kaddish, but also writing the book.
Well, my mother was extremely difficult, which is an understatement. And when I undertook these rituals, she wanted to have nothing to do with them. I did show a very, very early draft to my mother. And when she read it, my mother was alive at that time. My mother is now deceased. But when she read it, instead of saying, oh, I don't like what you said about me, she said, oh, it only makes me miss your father more. So I thought,
all about
okay,
her.
kind of like an endorsement. I'll take it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So she didn't say, well, you've told the truth, but I told the truth.
Yeah. Well, I guess the truth of it came through to her and she saw it. I mean, that's a blessing right there, actually, even if it wasn't direct.
Yeah, and I know so many writers of memoir worry about what will family members think. But I decided that this is my story, and if anyone in my family wants to dispute it, it's my memory, and I journal, and my journals informed this memoir. So not everything came from my memory. Much of it came from actual
documentation
journal entries. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Another reason to keep a journal, folks.
Yes.
Some people in here know about that. Yeah, well, and then you have 2 sisters.
I do.
How were they with you doing the prayer? I mean, I don't know. I don't remember actually in the book the situation with you, but they must have known you took on this project, you might call it.
Mhm.
Your mother and your sisters knew about that. So let's talk about that first, because we're talking about ritual that you chose to do, but every religion has things that are expected of us that
Mm.
family may or may not agree with.
Well, I'm the oldest of three sisters. My middle sister does not consider herself Jewish any longer, although there was one time when I could not make it to synagogue at the time of my daughter's near fatal car accident. And I
Ooh,
did call my sister and say, could you go to synagogue and say the prayer on my behalf? And she said, no problem. I'm there.
wow.
My youngest sister did undertake to recite the Kaddish, but she lived in an area where there was not a single synagogue that had a morning and an evening prayer service. So she was about very similar to me traveling the country. While she was in the same town, she was bouncing from place to place.
Such a journey, literally, huh?
It is a journey. Yeah.
Yeah.
She has told me she doesn't want to read the book.
Yeah.
So
Painful to her, do you think?
I'm not sure if it's painful or a little jealous.
Mhm. Here we are with family dynamics again.
Dynamic, yes. Yeah, family dynamics. I can't speak for all youngest because clearly I'm not. But I think there is a little bit of sibling rivalry there.
Mhm.
I
It
don't
looks
want to
like,
speak for her
okay.
on this call, but
Pardon me?
I don't want to speak for her
Right.
on the call, but she has been very, very candid with me that she has no intention of reading the book. She's not helping me to promote the book.
We were out of it, huh?
Yeah, right. My sister, who is not Jewish, is marching all over her community in Rochester, New York, going to independent bookstores, telling them to order it, going to synagogues, donating the book to them.
Nice.
She is out there marching on my behalf. So,
Well, that's a great story, Sarah.
yeah.
I mean, this is it. This is the thing. Different people will have a different take on our story and our book, and
And our relationship.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and relationships are like that. So, do you think that your sister, who also did some of the Kaddish, did you ever get to talk to each other about how that felt or what that was like to keep up this ritual that you both believed in?
One day she called me and told me she was going to quit. It was too hard. And I said, that's entirely up to you. We each have to do what we can do. And I certainly understand because it is hard. It is exhausting. I had to orchestrate my entire life around where and when there was a service.
Right.
If I was out of town and I couldn't get back home in time for the evening service, I had to stay out of town another night. I was constantly looking at when the air flights were going around my service times. So my sister did say at one point that she was going to give it up. She may have for a little while, I don't know, but I know that she did the best that she could to stick it out.
But was it an experience that the two of you could talk about in terms of the meaning of it or the feeling of it at all?
Not a lot. Again, my sister Jane had no involvement in Judaism. She didn't know how to read the Hebrew prayers. She
But she grew up with you. Did you?
She did, but I became much more observant than anyone in my family, including my father. I learned how to read Hebrew although I read at that time, I read it at a very rudimentary level, sort of like a first or second grader reading a primer. But I had much more familiarity with Judaism, with rituals. I had a community in my synagogue. I had been a member of my synagogue already at that point for years. And so it was even though it's a difficult thing to do, it was easier for me than it was for my sister. But at Thanksgiving, my sister Jane, my sisters and I alternated Thanksgiving, hosting our family for Thanksgiving after my mother couldn't do it anymore, after it became too much for her. And it was my sister Jane's turn 2 months after my father died. And she actually went to the synagogue where she lived and spoke to the rabbi and arranged for me to have an honor to be called to the Torah on Thanksgiving Day, which was huge, just absolutely huge. It was, for me, sort of a validation from my sister. Yeah, I guess the best way to say it was as if she was validating me. She could not be called to the Torah because she just didn't know the blessings. And so I was so grateful for that honor. And I was completely surprised when they called my name. I was like, like, those actresses at the Academy Awards, when they win, they go, oh, that's what I felt like.
Right. Very authentic response there. Yeah. So, so there's been, a range of, how you and your family are handling this. So that's really fascinating. Yeah. So, okay. So the writing, give us the arc of when you started and why, and then, some more steps along the way. What were the steps along the way, Sarah?
Well, the very first thing I decided to do was transcribe my journals, because the benefit of keeping a journal, you live your life in a certain forward path. And then when you have your journals and you can read them, you're like living life again. I wanted to transcribe them more just as a review process, but also the act of writing helps you remember things. And so I wrote them in journal form. And I thought, well, May Sarton, who I've read probably most, if not all of her books, which are in journal format, I thought, oh, I'll just publish this like May Sarton, just a bunch of journal entries. And somebody said, you gotta be kidding, that is boring. Nobody wants to read your journal entries.
Yeah.
So
not all of them.
not all of them, right? So I started to write it as a memoir, as a story. And as you know, it took me a very long time. Of course, life intervenes. I had a job that required a lot of travel. I had children at home at the time. Had a house. I've remarried. So it just took a while, but I took a lot of classes. I'm very fortunate because I live near Bethesda, Maryland, and we have a phenomenal writers center here with incredible instructors. And two in particular said to me, you have the basis for a memoir, and you should consider. When I would go to class, we had critique groups, and we had to submit chapters or essays or things that we had written for critique. And I would submit chapters. And this one instructor in particular, Ellen Herbert, said, you have the basis for a memoir. You should consider putting these together. At that point, I was submitting chapters to writing competitions and had won a number of awards for different chapters. Several of the chapters have been published in literary journals.
That's encouraging.
Oh, it was encouraging. And so then I just started trying to write it as a memoir. And it wasn't until I found this publisher and she said, we need more about your family history. I had some, but she encouraged me to add more. And when I found my publisher, I said, I will be open to anything you have to say. I have one non-negotiable, and that is we will have 36 chapters. And because in Judaism, 18 is high, which means to life, and 36 is double high, which is lives. So I wanted to have 36 chapters. So we had to do a lot of shifting around. She wanted to add chapters. I said, okay, we got to cut a chapter. We got to consolidate chapters.
The editing process, the revision process.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you and Liz Gilbert, her book, Eat, Pray, Love is built on the number of prayer beads, I think, like that. You're in good company.
Oh, yeah, I'd like to be up there with Elizabeth Gilbert. I didn't get a $30,000 book advance though to write my book.
Then there's that, yes, or even live the book so you can write it.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So okay. So, but tell me, what was it like to then dig into journals and then form those moments into story for you?
Well, when I write in my journals, I don't provide all the details that you need when you're publishing a book. Like my journals don't say that my father wore beige swim trunks. That came out of my memory. He always wore beige swim trunks and beige moccasins. Bland. So taking the journals and reliving that time period, when you're living it, you don't realize how extraordinary it is. But when I finished and I was transcribing the journals, I thought, wow, I did that.
You become your own witness to your life.
Yeah. And as we go through every day, we sort of aren't paying attention to how that day fits into the bigger whole of our lives. And so when I started to transcribe the journals, it was a very meaningful experience. I often will read a journal over again, but I filled 4 journals that year, and going through the whole year's journals, it was extraordinary. I don't know if that answers your question, Linda Joy, but
no, that's beautiful though. I mean, I'm imagining that long, slow process of transcribing. We have someone here in our group who transcribed many years of journals, and I'm gonna hopefully, Merle, you'll be able to talk with us in a few minutes. You and Sarah have a lot in common. Do you know Merle?
Well, she was on a
yes, she did her own event.
Yes, and
I
watched it or listened to it.
Great, you have a lot in common.
Participated.
Yeah. But this whole idea for other people who have kept journals or even might be keeping journals now, I mean, I think it's sort of a microscopic version and shorthand. This is why people say, as you said, I think I'll publish my journals. And of course, the problem is that it's not so much of what's in a journal is known by us and no one else, and therefore it doesn't appear in there as detail. Whereas with a story, we paint a picture. We're inviting people to walk through the movie with us in the story.
Right. Merle, I have great admiration for you. It is one of my goals before I leave this earth to harvest my journals. So kudos to you.
We'll talk in a few minutes about that some more. So, Sarah, you mentioned the publisher in passing, but I mean, tell us a little bit more about how you found a publisher and what that process was like.
Well, I originally had an agent, and I took a class with Jane Friedman on
Mhm.
how to write a book proposal. And I followed her instructions to the letter. And I sent the book proposal to agents who handled memoir and Jewish or ritual or religious topics. And I found that by going through a book, I don't know, I think it's called Agents, some book that just has lists of agents.
Mhm.
And an agent picked me up. She said that it was the best proposal she had ever seen. I had really done my homework and she wanted to represent me. And that was in March of 2018. And after 2 years, she hadn't sold the book. So I decided to go out and find a publisher on my own. And I had narrowed my search to 2. And I chose
Sorry.
Wonderwell.
Wait, where were you searching for the publishers?
Online.
Okay.
Um,
Publishers of memoir.
Mhm.
Click. Is that okay?
Right.
People are
Well,
always
first
asking that. Mhm.
well, I did reach out to Brooke at She Writes Press, but her calendar was filled for like a year and a half or 2 years.
Yes.
And I thought,
Not wait that long.
well, a lot of people were dying during COVID. And I thought, I have a grief memoir, and this might resonate for people who are experiencing these tremendous losses right now. And so I didn't want to wait. I wanted a publisher who could get that book out by 2023. And
you were looking for a particular kind of publisher? What did you whittle it down to in terms of whatever topics or focus or whatever?
I wanted a publisher who appreciated the story.
Yeah.
And I wanted a relationship with the publisher. That was very important to me. And when I talked to Maggie Langrick at Wonderwell, who is my publisher, she said, "We love your book. We love your story. We think we can make it stronger." And the other publisher that I was dealing with was ready to take it and just do editing, but not developmental edits. And I had already had 2 developmental editors edit the manuscript. So I thought, wow, this is ready to go.
It never stops. Let me tell you. It never stops. Go ahead.
When Maggie said, "We really think this can be a stronger book, and we would like to invest the energy in making it stronger." And I actually did call my sister, whose wisdom I value, and said, "I have one publisher who can get it out faster and we'll just do regular editing. And I have this other publisher who wants to make it stronger, but it's going to take longer to get out on the market." And she said, "Well, don't you want it to be the best you can be?" And I was like, "Oh, well, that's a no-brainer question." Sure. So that's how I went with Wonderwell.
Of course. Yes, it's clear, very clear. So when they said, I'm just curious, when they said stronger, what did that end up meaning or being? What happened?
Well, let me just say one other thing. They also have a sales force. And so my book is not printed on demand. It's actually published. The original run is 2,000 copies. And they have a sales team that is marketing it to bookstores and wherever.
Wonderful.
So please remind me your question again, Linda.
What was it? How did they make your book stronger? What did that end up meaning that they did and you did? What happened?
She took a lot of good stuff out.
Oh, what did you have to let go of, for instance?
Oh yeah, I had to let go. And partly because she wanted to add a lot more of my family history.
Oh, that's
like how my grandparents came to this country. And both of my grandfathers emigrated to this country to avoid religious persecution.
Well, that's a good topic.
Yeah. And so she added a lot of that. And because I was committed to 36 chapters, a lot of just wonderful writing had to hit the cutting room floor. And there were a couple of things that I retained, against her suggestions. But by and large, I do believe she has made this book stronger. And
well, I can understand why they would have that vision of this is a legacy story, actually.
yeah.
So they added that foundational element of legacy. As hard as that might have been on you, I can really see why somebody might think of doing that.
That part wasn't so hard. She felt that the thing that was the hardest, she felt that people wouldn't understand why I would make this commitment to my father and why my relationship with him was so deep unless they understood more about my mother. So the thing that was the hardest part for me was putting in about my mother's abuse.
Oh yeah, wow.
It's tough.
That would be.
For people who aren't familiar with the book, I know there's a couple people on the call who have read it or already have it or have read chapters of it in advance. My mother, when I was 10 years old, smashed me against a wall and broke my leg. And that was pretty hard to write.
Yeah, I bet. Very exposing, revealing.
Yeah. Putting that out in the world, that's the part that took more guts than anything else. But my editor assured me, she said, people need to know why your father was this hero to you and why you would do something like this that's so arduous for 11 months. They need a bigger context. And I have been subtle. I mean, there are many references to my mother and her dismissiveness throughout the book.
I remember that.
But she felt I needed to be more directive.
Well, I found her very upsetting myself, but I understand that experience from my own story. You know, and mostly because clearly what I remember, I haven't read your book. Well, I did read it recently, but I hadn't read it for a while. And then I was reminded of when you've got an uncompassionate, to say the least, uncompassionate parents, and even cruel at times, and certainly the abuse, and you have someone whose heart is so big, you know, which he is. I mean, he's very big in your story, in all those years and all the things that he did and you did, and you know, the way his personality. I mean, you know, this is your father, but I felt you made him accessible, deeply accessible as a human being of love, and why, and then again, this relationship, why you would honor him so deeply. It's very beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you.
And this is what we struggle to do in our stories, you know, is to make someone come alive so that we can love him.
Yeah.
You know, and then the reader is even more engaged. I mean, it just takes writing skill to do that. And by the way, this is writing and writing and writing, you know, to try to create that being that lives on the page without you, that lives on its own on the page.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? Now that's what we have to do. Make the movie come alive on the page.
Yeah. I hope I made him come alive on the page. I think I did.
Yeah, you did for me. And I'm sure for many of your readers. So you, so you were ready to publish it or get it published by 2018, and you had to wait. And then COVID happened. How did that interfere with your project, your writing and publishing project?
I don't know that it did. I guess when my agent and I decided, that I should try to go out on my own, she wasn't having any success. I think I was taken aback, and
Mm.
it was a while before
Disappointment set in, yeah.
yeah, and I didn't exactly know how to start on my own.
Yeah.
And of course, COVID and everything was shutting down, and the world was sort of
Suspended.
suspended. And
Yeah.
I was suspended because I had thought this agent who's with a reputable agency, I just figured, oh, she's not going to have any trouble.
Well,
Especially she had said my proposal was so excellent. So I had a setback, and it was a while, and I think it was the end of 2020 or the beginning of, no, it was 2021. No, either the end of 2020 or the beginning of 2021, when I said, I'm not just going to sit here and wait. Nothing's
let's get
going
on with it.
yeah, unless I take the bull by the horns, nobody's going to come knocking at my door and saying, oh, I'd like to publish your book.
And if they do say that, you want to send them away quickly. There's
No, if I came and said that, I'd say, how much are you giving me? What kind of royalties are you giving me?
Right.
Yeah, so it took me a while. And then, of course, once I signed with Wonderwell, then you have the editing, and then you have the proofreading, and then you have the copy editing, and then you have the select the cover, and then you have to, you have all these decisions to make.
Fun though.
Oh yeah. Picking the cover design was great fun.
Yeah, you get to look at, if you're lucky and you get this kind of publisher, you can be part of that artistic process. I'm sort of a font geek myself. I haven't done it lately because I'm doing the very final edits to my novel, folks, sending it off to the beta readers tonight, which is something. But, but you have input, with some publishers about the artistry of creating a book, which is its own beautiful art.
It was really interesting because they said that they would give me several selections within 3 categories. One category would be photographs, one would be an abstract, and one would be just a plain cover, like the cover of Joan Didion's A Year of Magical Thinking, just has just the words. And so they came back, they asked me to send photos. They came back with several covers with photos of my dad and me, and several abstract designs, and several plain covers. And as soon as I saw this picture, which I gave them the picture, but as soon as I saw it, I said, oh my God, I love that. And so I was afraid that they were not going to like that. So I said, okay, I have my pick, but you better tell me your pick first. And they said, no, you better tell us your pick first. And we were aligned.
Oh,
their whole
good.
I was 100% alignment.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
That doesn't always happen.
No, I'm sure it doesn't. But people who've seen the cover, it seems to resonate with people. And they say, oh, is that you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of publishers don't want to use a personal picture, but it really depends on the book. And this is very personal, intimate story. So it must have worked very well for them with that idea, I think.
Well, they all liked it, and I was ecstatic that we were all in agreement. I don't know what I would have done if they'd said, oh, we really all like this abstract design.
You'd be having a conversation with those people. Right. What you'd be doing. So tell us about your publicity marketing. How are you handling all that?
Probably not well enough. I'm learning now that our largest independent bookstore in the Washington, D.C. area is Politics and Prose. And the buyer there had already purchased the book before it came out and told me who to talk to. And the response I got was, oh, well, we do these 4 to 6 months in advance, and we usually have these events when the book's coming out. So, I'm sorry. I was like, 4 to 6 months in advance. 6 months ago, I was in editing. I wasn't thinking about
Yeah,
marketing.
this is the truth about publicity, though. Yeah.
My advice to anybody on this call who's considering it is start your marketing 6 months out, even if your book isn't finished, even if you don't have a cover design.
Well,
Because
it's too bad nobody told you that. You know, it is hard to know all these things we're supposed to know. Unless
Right.
somebody tells us, you know, how are we supposed to know? It's a whole other world. But thank you for sharing that.
But I'm doing tons of social media posting.
You are. I've seen
I
some of them.
just had an article published in the local Jewish Week, Washington Jewish Week, and it was picked up by the Pittsburgh Chronicle.
Oh,
I'm going to be at the Women Write Festival on Saturday, and I'm going to Maryland Writers Association Conference in October. So I am getting myself out there. This, of course, thank you, Linda Joy, for this opportunity. I did put together a launch team, people that I knew would help promote my book.
okay.
And these are people who I know from either in a personal relationship or people who I know from my corporate work that I did for many years. And these are people all over the country. So I do have people in Chicago and Wisconsin and North Carolina and Florida who are promoting my book on their social media. They're going into their local bookstores. They're going into their local synagogues. A librarian in New Jersey contacted me and said she's going to carry the book in the library and would love for me to meet with her sisterhood in her synagogue.
Oh, wow.
That's a longtime colleague, excuse me, and friend, knew her. So I'm just reaching out on a sort of a one-on-one, person-to-person basis. And my launch
Fabulous.
team.
Well, I think the takeaway here for everybody here is create your own launch team, no matter who your publicist is, even if you have purchased a publicist. You know, the majority of the work really comes through our efforts, and sounds like you're reaching out in all kinds of great ways.
Well, thank you. It's I'm discovering that it's a full-time job.
Yes, then there's that. Ooh, yeah. Well, you first you live it, then you journal it, then you write it, then you edit it forever, and then you publish it, and then you get it sold.
Yeah.
There we go. In a nutshell, right? Well, there's
Right.
lots of lovely people on this call, and I just wonder, and thank you all for being on the camera and also for listening. If anybody wants to talk to Sarah directly, ask certain questions, we have also the chat, a question in chat. So you can raise your virtual hand, otherwise I might not see it.
Should I take that question that's in the chat?
Yeah, you see it? Okay, great. Take the question in the chat, yes.
What did my publisher cut that I wish hadn't been?
Mm.
I bought a home, a historic property. I put a contract in before my father died and went to settlement after he died. And I had a lot of information about that home and what it meant to me. And she cut it to where it's just threadbare. And I had to fight with her to keep the Malamars scenario in the book, because I think it happens to all of us who are grieving. I was in the cookie aisle of the grocery store, and I don't usually go down that aisle, but all the other aisles were congested. And there were my father's favorite cookies, Malamars. And I just started crying in the grocery store. And I think that's a universal situation.
Oh, yes.
Where mourning, something will just trigger a song that they heard or something they see or a poem they read. And she had me really cut that down. She wanted to cut it out completely. And so it's been significantly cut.
Guess what you can put on your blog?
Oh, yes.
The whole damn thing.
Thank you. And what do I mean when I say I want to harvest my journals? And I don't know, Merle, if you want to weigh in on this, but I want to go through all of them, retain what I think my children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren might like to know about the world I lived in and who I was as a person, and shred the rest.
Mhm.
And I have shelves and shelves and shelves of journals.
So nice to
Um,
meet all of you journal people.
So
Some of us have gone, oh, why do we keep all this stuff? Because that's what other people say. Hey, Merle, would you like to come in and talk for a moment about harvesting?
Sure. Thank you. Sarah, this is great. Really interesting to listen to. I just ordered your book.
oh, thank you.
Yay.
Thank you.
So what I found in going through my journals, I have been keeping journals since 1974 and have a collection now of 380 of them. I went through them and read them. It took 14 years, but I realized that it's such a huge gift. And I did it so that I could also harvest my journals and take excerpts for my children originally, and then just decided to have a broader audience. But the experience, first of all, the experience of keeping a journal, I think is the greatest gift we can give ourselves, because our life comes back to us, as Sarah said, you just go right back to that moment in time. And so I just encourage everyone to do that. And then, especially if you're writing a memoir, it's wonderful to be able to have that information as it is, so that you have the dates and the time, and it really helps with the timeline as well. So I just say do it.
And that moment to moment intensive experience that then we build the rest of that context around that.
Right.
Thank you, Merle.
Thank you.
I know there's a couple of hands up, but I just want to add one thing to
Mhm.
Deborah's. The other thing that was taken out was my father was in ICU in a coma for 9 days before he died. And my editor didn't think that was the story. The story is about reciting Kaddish. And so she suggested that I start the story with the funeral, which was the day I said Kaddish for the first time.
Oh.
And a lot of the information about standing at his bedside, there are snippets of it throughout the book, but the chapter about that was deleted. So I don't know who raised their hand first.
So
Art.
we have Art and we have Paula. So Art, would you like to ask your question? Please unmute.
All right. Thank you very much. Sarah.
Yes. Hi, Art.
We belong to the same congregation.
Oh my gosh, we do?
We do. And I got your book. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, you were saying Kaddish for your father. And I think that was the day I told the joke at the
Oh my
Morning
gosh. Yes. That was my
Anyhow,
father's short site.
Yeah.
The anniversary
Yeah.
of his death. Oh my
So-
gosh, Art.
So reading your book, there's this love affair with your father. And then there's this aspect of your relationship with your mother. And the two parts are, one part is a love affair, the other part, maybe a hatchet job. I don't know how else to describe it.
He had the
But
hatchet.
Yeah, but your mother passed away 2 years ago. Did you say Kaddish for her?
No,
Okay, that's interesting.
I honor her yard site. I took care of my mother the last 18 months of her life, and I felt like I honored her in that way.
Yeah, that's
Decided to stop eating and drinking in October of 2019, and she lasted for 7.5 weeks.
wow.
And I was at her bedside doing everything I could to help her. Maryland does not have physician-assisted suicide. And it wasn't as important to her. It was very important to my father. It wasn't important to her. And I felt like those last 18 months, I had done everything I could to honor her.
Yeah.
But it's a fair question.
Thank you.
But I'll be in synagogue on her yard site.
Yeah.
And
Thanks,
December.
Art. Yeah, and thank you,
Welcome.
Sarah, for your very serious answer about when do we decide we've done what we need to do and let ourselves move to the next stage, whatever that is. And that's also part of both living, dying, and grieving and honoring. And sometimes we just need to decide where we are and all that.
I took care of my mother. My dad died in 2000 and my mother died in 2019. And I took care of my mother for 19 years. But we moved her to Maryland in 2018. And I
Okay.
took her for those last 18 months on a
Mhm.
daily basis.
That's a dedication and love in all its forms. Thank you, Sarah. Paula, do you have a question? We have a couple.
Yeah. Yes. Hi. Hi.
Hi.
I just, first of all, Shana Tova.
And that's how to you too. Thank you.
And I just want to thank you for sharing your story. And I'm about to order your book.
Thank you.
We have some things in common and some areas not in common in our Jewish background. But one thing we do have in common is your story about, well, I should backtrack. My dad was I grew up in a very secular home. So we did not set foot in a synagogue, but I did later emigrate to Israel and learned Hebrew, but always secular. So my Jewish identity is cultural and secular and Israeli, actually, more than religious, but I'm having I love ritual. So I'm gradually incorporating ritual back into my life over a period of time. And I have great admiration for the fact that you said Kaddish for all those 11 months. But what I wanted to get back to was, I can certainly relate to your story of being the oldest daughter and no sons. In my family, there was one son, but he wouldn't have been interested in carrying on the tradition at all. And I was the oldest of twins, so I couldn't quite claim the mantle of oldest, really. So I, couldn't even do that. But I very, very early on, as much as my father was shedding the mantle of his Jewishness, I sensed that if I didn't pick it up, it would really be lost for generations to come. And so I did pick it up in a very different way. And but I certainly remember by the age of 6, although I didn't have the words for it, but I was running up against that wall of that I was a girl instead of a boy. And so I really appreciate you bringing out that theme, and I'm so glad that you did what you did. And I've taken notes about your publishing journey because, well, you have the affiliated Jewish community. My readers are the unaffiliated, and by definition, who the hell are they, right? That's my dilemma, but that's another story. But I appreciate you sharing your journey on both sides. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula.
And my household growing up was very secular. We didn't observe holidays. My father was the typical once a year Jew, went to synagogue on the high holidays. But when it came to saying Kaddish, that was something he cared about deeply. And I'll answer your question, Merle, that's in the chat. My father believed that the redemption of his soul depended upon having the mourner's Kaddish recited for him. I don't know if this came from his war experience. My father was a frontline soldier in Germany in World War II.
Oh my goodness.
Was standing with 8 other men when a German 88 mortar shell hit. He was the only survivor of that, and he was in the hospital for a while. And I wonder, but I don't know because he never talked about it, and I never asked. I wonder if that's where he came to, well, I know that's where he came to believe in God. But I don't know if that affected his or influenced his belief that that God would look favorably on his soul if the Kaddish was said for him. What it is supposed to do for the deceased's souls lay in God's judgment stage for a year. And God looks down upon the descendants and makes his determination based on the behavior of the descendants, male descendants. Yes.
Mm,
And I convinced my father, or at least I believe I convinced him,
mm.
that a female descendant was just as important for elevating his soul to paradise as a stranger would be.
It's likely that God sees it that way too. It's just the
I
people,
sure hope so.
the people who wrote this stuff up were like not in that mindset at the time. Thank you
I
for that. I want to ask Linda, we're almost out of time. Linda Haynes, would you like to unmute and ask your question or make your comment?
Yeah, I wanted to say that you don't have to be Jewish to love this book. And I
Yes.
think that's something people need to understand, that it's so relatable regardless. I also believe we all need to understand other religions. And I don't know that much about the Jewish religion, and I loved learning about it. But I also loved knowing him and in the whole, and what it did. And when I shared with Sarah that it reminded me of my dad and how my love for him. And I mean, I just was so, the story was so good and so well written. And one of the things, Sarah, I love, and I was hoping you would do that, I turned the page and there were all those pictures. And I got to look at the pictures and then remember what you were talking about in it. And because I was thinking, gosh, it'd be nice if you had a picture in here. And then there they were all together. And I loved it. But I guess the whole thing is, it's not just for the Jewish community. And I think it's a good idea to focus on them, like marketing to them, but it's to anybody. Anybody that
Everything is universal, isn't it? You know.
yes, and the friendship and the relationship, and anyway, but I loved it. I'm almost done, so I can't wait to really talk to you about it.
Oh,
Thank
that's
you.
wonderful.
I'm glad you said that, because another goal that I had, or another objective in writing or in hoping to publish the book, was to show to people the importance of ritual in our lives, whatever those rituals may be, religious rituals, secular rituals, lighting a candle, playing music, whatever the rituals may be, they're important to our well-being, and particularly when we're grieving.
Yeah.
And I want to piggyback on that, Linda. I have a friend in Wisconsin who is not Jewish and who got through chapter 17. And in chapter 17, I write about Sukkot and building my sukkah. And he sent me a picture of a sukkah outside a synagogue. And he said, I read chapter 17. Now I know what this thing is.
And I was wanting to see it too. I was hoping you'd have a picture because I wanted to see that too. But a friend of mine's husband just died, and it was pretty much of a shock. And I shared her and I said, I think it's a really good book for maybe to, because she's got her, she's not Jewish, and I really admire the rituals, which I don't have those because I'm not in a faith community. So I really kind of jealous of it.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
you can have rituals, Linda, even without being in a faith community.
Yeah.
When you're feeling sad, if you come home and whatever it is, light a candle, put on your favorite music, sit in your favorite chair. There are all kinds of rituals. Going out for a walk in nature.
It's your intentionality of being connected with yourself and something else, some way of being internal that, I think a ritual gives. And on that note, we're out of time actually, but just Sarah, just congratulations all over the place. And thank you for all that you shared, because we need to hear all about your story from the very beginnings and the struggles, the family stuff, and your determination to find a publisher and the right path, which is also honoring. It's another way of honoring actually what your story is. And so congratulations on that.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for being here. And Linda Joy, thank you for this opportunity. I truly appreciate it. I love the work that you do in the world, Linda Joy.
Thank you so much. Yes, we're all here to support each other. So unmute and say goodbye so we can hear everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank
you so much. That's great.
Bye. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great
Bye.
news.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you again. Keep writing.